Now, Dr. Chen Wright, Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment. Jan is in the news a lot, and where is she at the moment? Oh, here she is. Come up, Jan. So Jan, of course, also makes it very clear to me in the interview that she is not a complaints body. Her role is that she chooses issues in the public interest and she investigates them, and she often has a lot to say in a way which has an impact on policy and law reform in future. She's an expert in the field, and whether it's fracking or 1080, I'm sure that you will have seen some of this in the media. There have been reports on 4 major investigations: mining on conservation land, a strategic approach to biofuels, state of the environment reporting, and most recently the greenhouse gases associated with large-scale use. Well, it's fracking. And of course, Dr. Wright has a Master of Public Policy, a Doctorate of Public Policy from Harvard University. So, Jan, come and talk to us about the role of the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, also an Officer of Parliament. Thank you.
Thank you, May. I notice the time seems to have gone askew a little. I took your 7 minutes very seriously, so I may even only take 6. The 3 officers of Parliament have different legislation and very different roles. Of course, what we have in common is political independence. We serve Parliament, not government. There are other commissioners, my title is Commissioner, other commissioners in Wellington, Families Commissioners, Children's Commissioners, Retirement Commissioner and so on, who are appointed by government, and it's confusing, and I find that the extent of my independence is generally not understood. And indeed, when the position that I hold was created, Parliament spoke at length about it as Environmental Auditor and Environmental Ombudsman. 25 years ago, the Environment Act was passed, and that created both the Ministry of the Environment and the Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment. Under that Act, I have 7 functions and 1 power. A strong power to obtain information from anyone, public or private, to the extent of cross-examining with the powers of a judge. There are 2 main things that we do in my office. First is investigations that lead to reports that are then tabled in the House by the Speaker, and the second thing is advice to select committees. So a recent report was on 1080, I think May's already mentioned that. The most recent one was on the science of water quality. And with regard to advice to select committees, earlier this year I spoke to the Local Government and Environment Committee on the Exclusive Economic Zone Bill, which I had some big concerns about and that was about environmental management of the ocean beyond the 12-mile limit. So there's a big range here. Reports and advice both typically contain recommendations from me, and we work very hard in the office to make those recommendations well-reasoned and pragmatic. In fact, our key performance indicator is around how many of them actually get taken up, which is really quite brave of us, I think. And although I can freely give advice, no one is obliged to take it. The first commissioner, some of you will remember, was Helen Hughes, and she was once asked if, as a watchdog, she had any teeth. And there was a very famous reply, and she said, no, but very big gums. And it's an old joke now, but in my first year in the role, I was interviewed by Radio New Zealand. I was pretty new in the role, hadn't got the hang of it really, and I was interviewed by Radio New Zealand about water, and I said that it should be priced where it was scarce and it was being used commercially. And to me, this was Economics 101, and I didn't understand just how controversial such a statement would be then, as it was. And one headline in a rural newspaper said, the new commissioner bears her teeth, and I was very glad it didn't say the new commissioner bears her gums. So I have no power beyond the ability to persuade, and it is up to the government of the day as to whether or not these recommendations are taken up. But we do follow up on them, write letters to ministers and so on, and keep track on what is happening to them and publish update reports. So quite serious about following them through. I am the 3rd Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment, and the 3 of us, I think, have been very different, and this, I believe, is as it should be, for 2 reasons. First, there is the style, the interests, and the background of each person in this role. You have to play to your strengths. In the legislation, the functions of the Commissioner are described very broadly, I think in contrast with the other officers of Parliament. My favourite function of the 7 is, quote, to investigate any matter which in the Commissioner's opinion the environment may be or has been adversely affected. Legislation doesn't get any more permissive than this. But with this freedom comes a very heavy responsibility to prioritise issues to work on so as to produce the most value. There is no shortage of environmental issues or of people concerned about them, and so we have a set of criteria for prioritising potential work within the office. And once having decided to work on a particular issue, to study the evidence and apply logic to provide really good recommendations going to Parliament and to busy MPs. The second reason for commissioners being different from each other, I think, is the times. What are the kinds of issues that are most pertinent at any point in time? What mattered in 1990 will not be the same as what matters the most in 2012 or will matter in 2020. The first Commissioner, Helen Hughes, I've already mentioned, set up the office. She did a great deal of work on local government. Regional councils were created within her time. The RMA and the Conservation Act were passed. The second Commissioner, Morgan Williams, followed Helen. Morgan took a particular interest in urban environments and over time increasingly focused on systems from a sustainability perspective. Excuse my Lauren Bacall voice, I have a cold. When I was appointed to the role, I did a great deal of soul searching as to how I should play it. The then Speaker, Margaret Wilson, gave me some excellent advice. She said, go to the Act, study the functions, and figure it out for yourself, which I did. And it seemed to me that the nexus between environment and economy had become especially relevant, that environment was moving firmly into the mainstream, that we no longer had a society with just a green fringe, but that the greening of the economy must be much more than greenwash. Another change over time is that people have become busier and busier. We are assaulted daily by too much information and simply don't have the uninterrupted time to read long reports. And I'm really surprised at how long some of those old reports from the office are. So early on, I made a decision to aim for short reports that are easy to read. But as you'll know, short and easy to read is a lot harder than long and learned. And may I notice when you were talking about being brief here, you were one of my favourite quotes from Mark Twain. I'm sorry I wrote you such a long letter, I didn't have time to write a short one. However, the clearest and most elegantly written report is of little use if it doesn't add value. Adding value by finding a new approach to an issue, doing analysis that hasn't been done, proposing solutions that haven't been considered before. And, of course, being clear and frank about the conclusions. When the report on 1080 was released, I said that we should use more of it in this country. It is not something I expected to say when we began the investigation, but it is where logic and evidence led us. No minister could say, use more 1080. It just couldn't happen politically. And that is the great value of the independence of my role. Thank you.